Hey everybody, it is Richard Harris, Scott Leese with season 4, episode 2 of the Surf and Sales podcast. We've made it 4 years. It's probably the second longest relationship Scott's ever had in his life with anything.
Definitely the longest work relationship.
That's for sure. Unless you call our relationship a work relationship, I don't know, but super excited to be here. Fun announcement. We are part of the HubSpot podcast network. So we appreciate HubSpot. And we actually just saw that we were named the #2 sales podcast in 2022 for salespeople to listen to, which is.
I can hear the crowd chanting now, overrated.
Yeah, exactly. Completely. So
yeah.
How did we pull that off, Scott?
I have no idea. We fooled them.
All the humor aside, super excited to have Matt Ferguson here, who is a sales manager coach, but also means he's going to have to understand sales. We're going to talk to him very specifically. The company he's with is MDF Coaching and Consulting, and he currently lives in Phoenix, Arizona. Now, here's the part, Scott, you missed this. We were talking before you got here about how he got to Phoenix. Just so happens Matt's a retired professional golfer. Is that correct?
I was so there's two different types of pro golfers, right? There's the kind that you see on TV,
right?
And then there's the kind that like teach and work at a private club or a public course. So I was not on TV.
Like, it.
So I worked at country clubs.
That's all right, dude. We will gladly come to your country club and take any golf advice.
That's how when the club out here got pitched to me, which is Mirabel Club, which is way up in North Scottsdale, it was like called the Ritz-Carlton of golf. So if you ever get a chance, you should play there.
It's a good thing we know somebody who can help us get a cheap drink.
My best friend's still a head pro, so
yeah. So that is cool. And the best part about golf is, I don't know, we haven't played in a while, is that it's the one sport I can actually beat Scott at sometimes. So
this is why Richard likes it, because he can beat me.
Like the only thing I can beat Scott at.
I'm working on that. On it.
Yeah. So Matt, thanks so much for coming on and having a good time. I know we're going to ask some questions around like golf and sales and management and leadership and that kind of stuff. But before we do that, like, give people a little bit of context of you. Like, where were you in sales? How did you even get to this role? Because golfing is a profession in whatever capacity is a very different venue of what we're doing. Not to say the concepts aren't the same. You're teaching and you're coaching and that's the same, but how do you get into sales?
So I'm out in Phoenix, and a guy from my country club in Cleveland was coming out to Las Vegas for, actually it was the NCAA tournament. So it was probably like 12 or 13 years ago, and went to Vegas, met him, and he was with his boss. And his boss kept talking about how much money they made, like that's all he talked about. And he was talking about 360, 400 grand. And I'm just sitting there listening. Right. And I said to my buddy, I'm like, Jesus, Joe, how much money do you make? I knew what they were selling at the time. And he's like, well, I don't make that much, but I make about 250. Well, I was making, as a golf professional, you work every weekend, you work every holiday, like you work every day, and I'm struggling to make $50,000, So I was asking Joe, I was like, geez, I love the club that I work. I actually like being a golf pro, but as I look into my future in this profession, I kind of know how it works, and there's only so many, great jobs. And he goes, well, the guy that I was with is actually coming out to take over the Phoenix office, so I can get you an interview. And I said, okay, great. Go down, interview, and they hired me. I had no idea what I was getting into. Okay. 3 months later, the guy that hired me, right, that came over to take over the office, he's packing, he was the director of the office. He's packing his stuff, right? Packing up his office. And I'm like, uh-oh, this isn't good. And I said, geez, Brandon, what's going on? And he goes, I'm leaving companies. I'm moving back to Chicago. I'm like, okay, well, this is an interesting decision. About 3 weeks later, corporate came in and basically shut down that office. So the office went from, let's say, 60 people to 12. Right, so here I am, I got out of sales, or I got out of golf to get into sales, and 3.5, 4 months later, I have no job.
Thrown immediately into chaos.
Right. And I'll never forget these words, okay? So they send us an email. And you either stayed upstairs or you went in the basement, right? Because it was a huge office. So I go down in the basement, VP of sales, who I've never met before, walks in. He looks at everybody in the office and he goes, "You all have a nervous look on your face and you should." And I'm like, okay. He goes, "Here's the good news. You all have jobs. It's just not here." And then they told us there are managers here from Chicago to Chicago and Atlanta. If you choose, you can talk to them and we'll give you a job and we'll relocate you. Or you can take, severance, and HR is here and you can talk to severance. It was a Friday. Don't have to make the decision today, but, take the weekend and think about it. Well, I'm in Phoenix. It's October 31st. So the weather's just getting nice. And I just remember, I'm like, for one, I didn't even really like that job. So I took my severance, and that was my introduction to sales.
Sounds like just about everybody else we know, Scott.
Yeah, I was just thinking that's happened to a lot of people, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, I actually think if it hasn't happened to you, you know what I mean? If you've been,
you're in the minority if it hasn't happened.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's bound to happen, actually.
Yeah, I just like the fact they sent you to the basement. It was a big building. There were probably multiple floors, and they sent you to the basement.
Huge. Send us to the basement.
Like that. That's old school. Scott would have done something like
that. I would have had my own office in the basement. No distractions down there.
Yeah. So why stick with it though?
Well, so here's the one thing that I did get out of. Here's the one thing that I got out of being there, and I was there a short period of time. But I had to go to 2 weeks of training. There was 1 week, and then there was another, right? And it was in Chicago. I thought the cool part of what that training was the company would bring in guys that kind of helped start the company. And there was over 1,000 reps at the time I was there. And I always thought that was kind of cool. I was like, well, that'd be kind of cool to start a company, or help start a company, be one of the first sales reps. And then a competitor interviewed me, and this small little startup interviewed me. And when I walked in, we were kind of in a closet. It was such a small office. And I swear, I think I sat in a lawn chair, and I looked around and I'm like, well, if I want to help kind of start a company, I think I got to take a chance and go with this company. And I'm glad I did, because I was there 5 years. We had started at zero revenue, grew 150% year over year. I was there 5 years and ended up growing the company close to $10 million. So that's kind of how I kind of started my career and fell in love with sales.
Maybe I'm paraphrasing, but it seemed like you sort of said you got into sales for the money. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. My question about that is, why do you think that's become kind of taboo or negative to just say, listen, I got in it because salespeople make a lot of money? Why is that such a negative thing now? Or is it? Maybe it's not, and it's just my circle.
Scott, it's funny that you say that, because here's the thing. Yeah, I think I looked at it and I thought, because I'm really not about money, but
I don't know, Matt, you said that these guys are making 350 and you were making 50, and you're like, I got to do what those guys do.
You're actually 100% right. I've literally never thought about that in the last 13, 14 years, however long it's been. Right. But I looked at it like I'm working my butt off, right, to make no money, and the chance of me getting like a top head professional job, making 150 to 200 is very small because the way the golf business was going wasn't great. So I think I looked at it as, man, I could have weekends off, and even if I could make 100, I'm doubling what I was making now. But I don't look at that as negative. Like, especially when I was interviewing reps, I would ask them like, hey, why are you in sales and this and that? I mean, I actually liked the people that, oh, I'm in it to make as much money as I can. I just don't think, looking on the behaviors over the years, like people really do want to make that much money, because if they did, they just figure it out and work a little harder. You know what I mean? So to answer your question, I don't really know. I think a lot of people think they want a lot of money, but either don't know how to get it, or, are lying to themselves.
Yeah. I mean, it does on some level come back to like, oh, you say you want to do this, but you're not willing to do the things necessary to get that. Right. But I think that a lot of people are looked down on a little bit, or it's frowned upon to just flat out say, listen, I was making 40 grand as a golf pro or a teacher or whatever, and I got into sales because my friend Richard was making a couple $100,000. And I think it's even more frowned upon for people who are doing fairly well, making 350 like your friend Matt was, who then say like, well, I want to take this new role and move up because here I can make 500. And it's interesting now. There seems to be a big negative connotation around that, and I've never really understood that. Maybe Richard understands it. I don't.
Well, hold on. There might be a deeper thing I just thought about here in this conversation, because I know I kind of understand where you're going. Is the negativity, would the negativity be more on the money that you're making or the fact that you're in sales? Because I think sometimes, people that think they're in sales, it's like a negative thing. Like I've worked for a company before where like the sales reps were just looked at as almost like a bad word,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think that might be a little bit more of,
I was talking more from a perspective of like salespeople talking about other salespeople. It's like, no, Scott, you don't talk about it like you're in it for the money. You're in here to help people. You're in here to solve problems.
So yeah, it's inappropriate to talk about greed, right? And it's kind of like, but we would all change jobs if someone paid us double, wouldn't we? Like, everybody's got a number.
I mean, Matt would probably go be a golf pro right now if somebody gave him 350K.
Totally. Right.
I wouldn't, but
I'd go be a golf pro. I'd be a shitty golfer. I'd be the guy like, hey, watch Richard. Don't do that. Do it this way. I'd be the Gong of golf, right? Like, here, watch Richard. Here's how you should improve. I believe, I went through a huge Steinbeck reading frenzy this summer, and in Grapes of Wrath, he dedicates this entire chapter to the car salesman ripping off the Okies. Oh, the tires are great, and this and this, and if you read the chapter, it's fast talking, it's really slick, and just you got to take this car. Oh yeah, you're going to be great out there. And I just have this belief that so many people were forced to read that book for the last 50, 60 years that it just built that in of the car salesman. Like, I don't know very many people who haven't read that book in high school, right? In those worlds that I live in. And I think it just lasted for people. I also think it was probably true back then, and I think it's still true now. But I think, how did it get out to the masses about sales and having this negative thing? I think that was a big piece of it. If millions of people read that book, then it's somewhere there in their head. I don't know.
Well, I want to shift gears and know more about what Matt does. He's teaching sales managers how to be better sales managers, better leaders, presumably. What is one thing straight away that every new sales manager needs to come to terms with and execute?
Well, let's talk about most people that get promoted. most people to get promoted are top performers, right? And I think they take, at least, you know, I took the job, I wanted to help people, right? I wanted to help people get better. But I think the pitfall that I fell into in the beginning was I was going to save the world and I was going to turn everybody into me. Right. And I was going to make everybody a top performer, just like I was. And then about 3 or 4 months in, I was like, holy cow. Like, is it me? Like, am I bad? Am I a bad manager because I can't get people to perform like I could? And I was subjective, I was emotional, and I just struggled a lot with it. And it was very hard for me, but like, you can't make everybody into me. Like I'm me, I'm the way that I am, right? And everybody needs to be coached different. So that is the number. I had a list of 10 of the biggest mistakes sales managers make. I can't remember which one that was, but don't try and duplicate yourself as a new manager, because everybody's different. So that was a big awakening for me.
What do you, so, you know, we talked a little bit offline of that. You really focus on new sales managers, right? And I agree with you. Like, we all got promoted because we were good at closing and we were good at handling objections and we were good at following the process and making it happen and all this stuff. And maybe we helped with some interviews, right? Maybe we helped define the new process. Maybe we did a little bit of the training when someone new came on board, like showed that a little bit of acumen, right? The one thing that's never taught, and I'm curious to how you think about it and teach, is nowhere were we ever taught before we got promoted, well, here's how you manage conflict resolution with 2 salespeople. Here's how you deal with territory issues. Here's how you write a comp plan. Here's how you handle the person whose cat and, you know, significant other broke up with them and took the cat with them, and like just all that soft skill stuff. You know, any suggestions for people who are like, okay, here's how you're gonna have to navigate some of those things? Because I don't think people are prepared for it.
It's funny because, you know, I don't know about you guys, but Scott, when you were promoted, or Richard, when you were promoted the first time, did you receive any, you know what I mean, any training? Or did you just kind of get thrown into the
Absolutely not. No.
Look, unless you went to like Xerox or somewhere, or maybe Salesforce, right? You get that stuff, but not in the SMB world, like not in where most people are, you know.
You know what's funny about that is 2 weeks ago, I had a meeting with somebody. They have over 14,000 employees, right? New manager. I mean, you guys would know who the company was. And I asked him, hey, what's been the biggest surprise for you so far? And he's like, actually, there's no training. When I asked about what the training was, they told me, well, we're trying to put something together, but for right now, you're on your own. You know what I mean?
Yep. And
that led me to throw something out. I did a poll on LinkedIn, and then I've done some surveys too, but over 82% of people have told me that in their current management position, they've received little to no training, right? So like, you get thrown into this position that's completely different from what you were doing, right? Because now you're responsible for everybody else. And now your paycheck relies on them, right? And there's no training. And then we wonder why people, like I struggled, you know, for at least a year or two, you know, just trying to figure it all out.
What was the first thing you figured out?
For making everything objective.
What does that mean?
So here's what I like to, I have 2 personas and managers that I use, and I have a slide that I use and teach off of. And I call one a pipeline manager, okay? And then I call other a structure manager, okay? You're gonna spend time in both, okay? But like when I started, I was a pipeline manager, and that's just my word for it, right? But all I was worried about was where everything was, chasing and help people close deals and try to hit a number. Okay. When I look at the structure manager is more on, sales math, structure, process, putting people in the right place to win, understanding where everything is so you can make minor changes. But when I talk about objective, like, I like to lay out all the numbers, all the math, right? And look at, all right, we have 10 sales reps, we have 15 sales rep, whatever it is. Like, what is the number right? Like, are my expectations right? And kind of manage off of that, right? Because I want to take the argument out of everything, make all the numbers public, make them all transparent, right? So there is no argument and it's all black and white. And then I can manage and coach and improve people, off those numbers. So when I say objective, it's more black and white, right? To what the data says versus subjective. Oh, I think that's the way it should be.
I think sales managers they just like are innately adverse to coaching and training and getting in the weeds. Yeah, you're nodding your head yes for anybody who's
Yeah, I was waiting for him to answer.
Yeah. I mean,
Easily.
I had a couple conversations in the last few days and people were asking for help in a leadership role. And I found myself saying, well, that's your job. Is to get in the trenches and coach them and help them. And I mean, one particular group I'm thinking of had never done any role plays before with their reps and practice their pitch and things like that. What is going on that a top performer is getting promoted into a sales manager role, or maybe not a top performer, maybe somebody who's been in sales management a while, and they're not doing some of those basic blocking and tackling things? Why is that happening?
Here's the reason that I think now. I think people think managers, and I've had managers that do this before, right? I've had CEOs that have done this before, where they think a good question to ask people, like, hey, how can I help you? Where do I need help? Right? The manager should know where they need help and help them, right? But if you're not like in the weeds in your numbers, and like Kevin Dorsey uses a term that I love, that I told him I was going to steal. He told me I could steal it from him. But like he uses this term, don't micromanage, be micro aware, right? And be micro aware of everything that's going on. Because when you're micro aware, then you can stay ahead of your problems and actually help people where they need help, versus asking people where they need help, which they usually don't know. And then a lot of times with people I coach, like where they struggle in one-on-ones is they tell people like it's not objective in where the person needs help, and then the other person doesn't need help there. And then it's kind of like a battle back and forth, versus it being extremely aware where the person needs help. They're actually open to getting the help, which means they're going to be more open to your coaching, which means it should improve more. But
to Scott's point, do you think a lot of the managers are afraid to do it, or is it that it was never modeled properly to them, so they don't know how to do it, therefore they're afraid to do it?
I think I don't think they're afraid. I think it's the latter, Richard. I think a lot of people just don't know what they don't know, and they were thrown into a position. So the only way they know how to do it is the way that they did it. So they get, you know what I mean? They get frustrated. I've been there.
Yeah.
Where it's like, well, how many times do I have to tell this person the same thing, right? And then you get frustrated, and then they get frustrated, and then, you just end up in a bad spot.
Yep, I totally agree. I see that all the time. Is there anything you're noticing generationally these days, right? Like as the Gen Z starting to move into management, or the millennials versus, the three of us who are Gen Xers, like, are you seeing mindset differences that, good, bad, or otherwise? I mean, they could be great mindset differences.
The The thing that's, I'm telling you, the thing that's consistent with everybody I coach, and this is anybody from 26-year-old, and I have one client that's pushing 70. They get frustrated. They get frustrated because people don't do it how they did it. And then my question always is, well, have you shown them what to do? Have you shown them metrics? Have you shown them expectations? And very few people like have it all laid out into, hey, this is the average touch point per meeting. This is the average close rate, you know, whatever their sales process is, whatever those metrics, whatever those numbers is, like that's where I spend the majority of my time, is trying to figure out people's sales math, lay it out, and then they can manage and coach off of that. But like there's all this data out there, right? But people just don't seem to use it right.
Scott, go for it. Say it.
Richard was on mute again.
Yes.
Attaboy. Way to sneak one in there, man.
We're
Way to
slow.
sneak one in.
Oh,
So how do you coach the manager to execute these things? Like, how do we get them to adhere to this process, put it in place, and stick with it, and not abandon it, you know, when we're not around? And what is it going to take at a larger scale to sort of get sales managers improved to a point where they don't need people like you to coach them? As funny as that sounds, that's kind of our ultimate job, is if we coach everybody up enough, we play ourselves out of a job.
So Scott, where I first caught your attention back in the summer, I was listening to your podcast with Mark Smith. I don't know if you remember that or not, but I sent you, I was listening to Mark and I was laughing. I'm like, this is exactly what like I'm talking about in the ATM approach, right? And the first thing I do with every manager is, for one, I have to understand what they're working with, right? And I just set out an objective way to rank your team, right? And I call it ATM because I believe that you should treat your team like a bank account, right? You're going to invest in areas that are going to help grow your bank account, and you're going to kind of avoid the stuff that, you know, doesn't help you grow. So I rank them into 3 categories. A stands for awesome, T stands for typical, and M stands for mess. and I'll never forget, I sent you the book, you read it, you sent me like, oh, this is awesome. I love this, right? And I was like, this is like what Mark's talking about, because when I got first started, right, I'm looking to duplicate the A player, right? I'm looking to duplicate the A player. And like, you know, in 5 years, at my first startup, and we did pretty much full sales. We startup, right? We hunted, we closed, and we retained, right? And there's not many people that are good at all 3. But it was hard to find A players. We sold advertising. It was hard. It was a hard sell. But what I realized was, man, if I can get my metrics right, if I can get my expectations right, those middle tier, that B player, they can be just fine, right? And then I can build some up to A. And then the mess was what I tried to avoid, because I want to give everybody the same opportunity to succeed. But as you guys know, sometimes people just take the wrong sales job, right? And the sooner you can move off of them, you know, they find a better job and everybody's in a better situation. I've seen that happen a lot. But the first thing I start with is, how do we rank our team? What do we have? And are we in a good place or are we in a bad place? And then make sure our expectations in sales math are, so we can manage off of that and kind of go from there. So everything's laid out. So if there's a problem somewhere, if your sales are down, is it a closing problem, or do you not have enough meetings? Like, everywhere through the process should be based on numbers and math, right? And then you can coach off of that.
Just making sure I'm off mute. Completely agree. And oftentimes those C players, you need to have a how's everything in your life going conversation, right? Like, what could usually there's something else distracting them. They're, sometimes those C players may be in the slump and they used to be B players, so you got to figure out what else is going on. So I agree with you. At some point you have to move off from them and focus on that mid to high range. So I love that. We got to move to wrapping this up, but obviously, Matt, we always turn it around and say, what questions do you have for us? So I'll give you a second to think about that. Big shout out and thanks to HubSpot for sponsoring us and putting us in their podcast network and naming us a top podcast. Like we are genuinely appreciative of that. But we were surprised when we got that call a couple of weeks ago. So thank you very much, Matt. What question you got for us?
Actually, Richard, can I add something real quick?
Yeah.
So if you guys can see the sign behind me,
Yep.
it says small wins equals big wins, right? So one of my things is when I go back to metrics and looking at that, right? Is everybody has a number that they have to hit, right? Whether you're a manager or a rep. My brother passed away, it's going to be 2 years ago, March 1st.
Sorry to hear that.
And we found when his wife was cleaning out his car, found that Post-it note in his right below his dash, like right kind of under the radio, right? And that's his writing, and like small wins equals big wins, right? I talk to him every day. He was a medical salesman, right? So he's in the car all the time. He was in Cleveland, I was in Phoenix. So I talked to him every day, and he had never brought that up. And when she sent that picture in our group message, when she cleaned out that car, I started thinking about small wins equals big wins. And I was like, man, that kind of goes for everything in your life. If you do the small, consistent things each day, right, they add up over time and they compound, and small wins equals big wins, right? So like in my 6-step process that I teach people, that when we're looking at expectations, if you think about it in sales, right, it's the little things that you do every day for your reps, right, that hold them accountable to those things that equal the big wins. So that's a lot in my, teaching, is doing the little stuff every day in order to do that. So I just wanted to share that because it means a lot to me.
Great reminder.
Yeah, super appreciative of that. And been staring at it, and I meant to even ask about it and sort of got distracted because I was on mute. I was trying to make sure I didn't go on mute. So thank you for sharing that. And I agree. I think it is all about controlling the little things, right? Control what you can control and break down big things into little things. So I like that.
Yeah, I think
celebrating and celebrating the wins that we do have. We're so quick to beat ourselves up about everything.
Yep.
That sometimes we forget to celebrate anything that we did well.
Well, sales is mostly negative, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's 100 no's to get a yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Most managers wait till the end of the month to try to get as much stuff in as they can, right? Instead of just doing it every single day. I think that's just the best way to manage.
Scott sometimes has a problem taking yes for an answer.
What he's trying to say is that I need to read that sign over and over and over because I struggle with that particular problem.
So what questions do you have for us, Matt? What can we do to help you? Thank you for sharing all this wisdom and sharing these stories and insights with us.
Here's what I'd ask both of you guys, right? I've been I'm on my own for less than a year, right? And I started this part-time and then have grown. But what's the biggest, and you guys have been on your own for a while, like what would be your biggest, advice to me?
Diversify would be the thing that comes to mind. And Yeah, it's a hot topic, I think, for people who are kind of traditionally employed right now is, hey, you've got your regular job, but you also should think about other sources of income. I don't think people think about it as much for solopreneurs. So you've got your main business, which is your coaching business, right? Well, what else are you doing? And there's a lot of different things. Could be monetizing a newsletter, could be monetizing a podcast, could be monetizing events, could be coaching teams instead of individuals, or individuals instead of teams. It could be building and running a community. It could be creating a digital asset, that's like a course based on what you teach. It could be a physical asset, like a book that you write. And I think that too many solopreneurs right now who are jumping into this, or people who've been in the game for a really long time, even have all their eggs in one basket, right? So I run my consulting business. I run surf and sales. I run Thursday night sales. I could go on and on and on with all these different things that I do. And sometimes one or more of them dry up. And if one of them dries up and that's the only one I got, I'm in deep trouble.
Yep.
When I'm out on my own, big time. So I think that it's wise for people to take a look at what else can you stack on top of that is related to what you do. And it kind of becomes like a flywheel for you. It's like, okay, I create this product that is about coaching, and people go through that product and love it. And then they come to me for a coaching, and that's my main thing. And, extensions kind of who you are and what you do. That's something that I would advise you to look into. Richard?
Yeah, I see everything as an asset. Everything I do is an asset, right? So I'm a part of several communities, so I make sure I take time each day to respond to things or add comments or answer things, because that's part of the brand. I then take those answers to people's questions and I turn them into a LinkedIn post. I then take the answers to that and make it a blog post.
Yep.
And other social places. And the one thing I've learned is that not one person in the last 6 months since I really started focusing on this has ever called me out to say, dude, you just keep repeating yourself this week. Like, not one person, because people find us in different channels.
Yeah.
Right. One place we've sucked is we've got 400 episodes of this podcast. We barely ever heavily promote it, and we certainly don't go in and cut it up and snippet it and put in subtitles and do all those things to just build the awareness of it. We're starting to do it. We got 400 of these episodes. How many blog posts could we write off of this today alone? Right?
Good Lord. Enough for 4 years worth of stuff at least.
So again, that's a piece, is just seeing everything as an asset and how you can utilize it and stuff like that. So I think that's the biggest piece. And then I think the other thing is just being aware that the ups and downs are going to happen, and that, the business will find you, right? It's going to be an interesting year in terms of people in the coaching and training business, right? Like, I'm starting to finally see, all these layoffs come along, and then it's like, oh my gosh, they never talked to me about training. It just started, took about 2 or 3 weeks longer than normal. Just started people coming in and saying, okay, we're ready to do training. We're ready to train who we have left, and those kind of things. So I think those are the, it'll find you, but I think you have to go out and put the karma in the world. That's my biggest thing.
Yep. No, that's good advice, and it's definitely something that I started on LinkedIn. Then I actually messed around on TikTok, which is an interesting platform. I don't think you guys are on there at all, are you?
No.
Not really.
I really don't want the Chinese government to find out any more information than they are loading balloons over me. So I'm sure they have plenty, but yeah, I'm adverse to that one. So but no, what is it like? Just out of curiosity, like, is it as obnoxious as we hear it? Not you, but
yeah, definitely not Matt, because he would never be.
Yeah.
I like it. It's interesting because their algorithm is good, and I get way more interaction because I do videos mostly. That's why I went to TikTok. Like I do, you guys,
Sure. Yeah.
we were in the, we were part of the same a couple years ago, and I saw him doing videos, so I just started doing them. But that's why TikTok, and I do some YouTube shorts too. But I get a lot of good interaction and inbound on TikTok, so it's worked out well for me.
I've threatened to do it for a long time and I just never did it. That's usually my thing, right?
You know
Like,
what?
"Scott, here's an idea. Either Scott will run with it and make it better than mine, or I won't do it and I'll be like, shit, I should have done that."
The funny thing on TikTok is I'll do bad manager skits, right?
Oh,
Where
that's fun.
I'll have different characters, and those are the ones that get. I have one with over 100,000 views, because obviously a lot of people have bad managers, so that gets the most because it's not just the managers, it's to everybody. So that's been an interesting,
That's really good. I like that. Yeah, everybody likes negativity. Circling back to the very beginning, everybody likes negativity in sales, right? So, Matt, thank you so much for coming on, man. We really appreciate it.
Hey, this was fun. I'm glad to come on anytime.
Yeah. So, and for those, what's the company again?
Oh,
I'll butcher it.
My website is mattdferguson.com. And then all my stuff, so much of my stuff's on LinkedIn, and then my TikTok channel is at Small Wins, Big Wins.
Wait, what's the TikTok channel?
At Small Wins, Big Wins.
Oh, there you go.
At Small Wins equals Big Wins.
There you go. All right. So follow him on TikTok, because Scott and I
because Richard's not gonna.
Yeah. Now I might be inspired. So if I can get a long blonde hair wig, I might be Scott Leese as a manager.
That's all I need. That's all I need is a fake account.
Yeah.
A verified fake account of me on TikTok. Great. Here we go. All right, Matt. Good luck, man. Take care. Thanks again.
Thanks, guys.